Ben, I sent you over some talking points and some things to help us kind of move the conversation along today. But where I'd like to start was if you would just tell us a little about yourself and, of course, tell us about Airops.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Well, thanks, Imran, for having me on. And yeah,
I've been looking forward to this for a while.
okay.
Cool.
Well, hopefully I can deliver. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. So yeah, my name is Benyamin Holley. I'm a GTM engineer at Airops. Airops is a company that helps brands get cited in AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, wherever AI is happening. I don't even know how to describe it anymore, but the AI landscape is becoming super fragmented now. And so Airops, we have a functional product. I'm not giving it enough credit. It's a very good product, but where it's going, which excites me and why I even took the role on, is think about all the different AI surfaces that are here today now. Like every chat bot on a website is an AI. Cursor is an AI. Like I discover products in Cursor and Claude Code now. Like Amazon Rufus is an AI that you want to get discovered in. Like what if we could help products, e-commerce stores get discovered in Shopify AI tools better, so these are the challenges that we're working on solving. But anyway, I won't like shill Airops too hard because there is a question that you actually included later on that does ask a really interesting question that I was thinking about before about like how would Syft and Airops work together. But a little bit about me. So yeah, I started my first sales role was at a motorcycle dealership. Before that, I ran a recording studio and worked in recording studios and stuff like that. Then my first SaaS job was at an SDR at PandaDoc, which is just a e-sign tool. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. From there, I worked at some other companies. My last role was selling to IT service providers, and we also had the same name as Imran's current company, but it was spelled with a C, so it was CYFT instead of SYFT. And there's a couple of other companies who have the same name as well. There's a few different companies named Syft. So anyway, and so
this is the one that matters.
Yeah. Now that I don't work at the other Syft, this is the one that matters. So now I work at Airops as a GTM engineer. And basically, there's three things that I kind of like are my main pillars. So programmatic automated outbound. So that's emails, LinkedIn campaigns, whatever it might be. I work with the SDRs on like enablement to a certain extent, but also providing them with like context, data, campaigns, things like that. And then of course, like back-end infrastructure automations for myself and like the ABM pod that I sort of like work in. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Did you always start? I was curious. Like, did you start on the ops and on the more automation side, or what? Like, is your background in sales, or like where did you kind of start?
My background's more in like direct sales and maybe like to a very, very small degree like entrepreneurship, because I ran a recording studio. It wasn't like successful or anything like that, but I was running it. And that's a sales job. You know what I'm saying? Like you have clients, you sell them time and things like that. And I didn't really think of it as like sales at the time. And I always tell people like maybe if I had more of like a sales mindset, I might still be doing it. So yeah.
That's funny. What kind of motorcycles did you sell?
I worked at an Indian dealership, Indian and Kawasaki. So, but we sold all kinds of bikes. We had, used bikes too. So, but those were the two brands that we carried as a store.
Indian as in Indian, the country India?
No. There's there's a motorcycle dealership.
There's a motorcycle brand called Indian?
Yeah, there's a motorcycle brand called Indian. Yeah.
It's really old, right?
I mean, the brand itself is old, but like people have like it's died and people have like bought it over the years. So I don't know what's in a name, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's great bikes though. Yeah, definitely recommend. So
and you yourself are a biker, right? I see all your Twitter posts all the time. You kind of do cross country stuff.
I have a motorcycle. I try to ride it when I can. Now that the weather's nice out in North Carolina, I'll probably be doing some riding. So yeah.
Very cool. It's almost a different conversation. Like I worked in a bicycle store on the weekend selling bikes, and I wrote a whole thing about it. Like, how how you learn about sales or like relearn about sales, right? Doing direct sales like in retail, it's an excellent experience. I think everybody should do it, but that's a whole different conversation.
Greg is a biker himself.
Big into cycling, yeah.
No, retail sales are great. Like people, like when I got into SaaS, like there was like this, like, I don't want to say bias, but like a discounting of the sort of experience that I had. They're like, oh, well, it's not the same thing. And now that I've been in SaaS for a few years, I'm like, dude, like selling enterprise software is not really that much different from selling a fridge at Lowe's. Like enterprise software reps want to think it is, but it's there's some more red lines, but I don't know.
Actually, since we're on the subject, in the bicycle store, we had exactly the same problem that occurs in SaaS sales, where a lot of the people who worked with me were just way too knowledgeable. They'd ask about some component on some racing bike, and they could tell you like the entire history of that component and all the different generations that it had been through, and all the different, like, way more information than the average buyer was looking for. But hey, let's pivot this conversation. I want to talk about at the highest level to get this started about how AI is, transforming go to market. Like I think with your tool and things that you're focused on, you're in a great position to kind of like help share what you're seeing in the landscape, and feel free to like talk about too where you think it's going, like what you think might happen in the future with tools like yours.
Yeah. So I think like broadly what AI is doing is basically it's sort of doing the same thing that's happening in software engineering, like vibe coding and all this stuff, which I'll probably talk about a little bit. Like it's just making the gap between like what's possible and what you can sort of imagine much smaller. Like an example is like some of my colleagues who are not like super technical will like ask me for stuff that they like know is possible that they would have never like asked for, 2 years ago, or I don't know, I mean a year ago. Like they would have had to have like RevOps resources or like engineering resources or something like that. And I'm like, I'll just go like build that automation in Clay or just, in Cursor even sometimes, in like an hour and a half, and we'll kind of call it a day. I also think like it's like exposing people who still have like a 2015 mindset. I think it's like what I notice is like when people ask me about like, what kind of like AI tools or whatever I should be learning about. I guess, I had a conversation with a guy before this where he was asking me about like Claude Code and stuff. And I was like, well, Claude Code is like commoditizing all of these sorts of like automation building skills. Like those things are not really that important because like I'm like a barely literate like SDR, and like I can go like stand up an app in Versal. So really what's actually becoming way more important again is like messaging and taste. And I know that's sort of like what people post about on LinkedIn as like taste is the moat or whatever. And we go back and forth on it. Like I go back and forth on it. I'm like, oh, I don't know if the AI is going to be that good. And then like 3 months later, I'm like, oh my God, like taste is definitely the moat again. Engineers are cooked. And then, 3 months later, it kind of flip flops. But I don't know if that's a super satisfactory answer. That's just sort of like 10,000 foot view of what I see changing.
No, I think it's good. Imran, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, I guess I had a follow-up question. You said there is like this thing where you oscillate between taste and then like automation, and so like what causes like you to kind of oscillate towards like, oh, maybe taste is not like that important, but like the other stuff is, and what is that other stuff? Like I'm trying to would love to kind of understand that.
Yeah, so I guess when I say taste, it's sort of like how would I put this? It's like the sort of like ephemeral soft skill of being able to like figure out what you should say to somebody in a message, whether it's an email or something like that, or how you should build a product, graphic for your company LinkedIn page that like is super cool. Like these things are like taste. They're subjective and not objective. And that's like kind of, I feel like the only non-commoditizable like skill, or those sorts of like groups of skills. But the reason I go back and forth on it is because at least like in my domain with emails and stuff, emails and, whatever kind of messaging, cold calling too, which is, still like tough, but, excuse me. I guess like if you can figure out when to reach out to the right person and why, the message and the medium kind of don't matter, because like think about like the way I always think about messaging is if somebody is like on a train tracks and they're like trapped on the train tracks and you like knock them off the train tracks, it kind of doesn't matter how hard you kick them because they're like no longer on the train tracks and they should like listen to what you have to say now. And so like when I think about taste, sometimes I think about like we're optimizing for, oh, this graphic needs to be beautiful or this email needs to be like written so well. But like I think the tighter your targeting is, like the less important your messaging is. And so I guess that's what I mean. And I go back and forth because and I think what happens is like as the technology catches up, like people are able to automate 90% of the taste, optimize for that with like AI. Like everybody can go write a very succinct 4-line email that makes a relevant observation about somebody's business in 2026. Like, but in 2022, that was like, wow, you personalized an email with, I don't even, do we even have AI in 2022? Like kind of, or like these various bespoke data sources that we would use. And nobody's impressed by that now. And so like, as the bar keeps raising, like you continually have to keep like raising your own bar. And so I guess that's kind of like what I mean by like, I flip flop back and forth, just depending on like where I'm at, where the technology's at, that kind of thing.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. I think there is also this one view, which I would crudely put as like taste is uncaptured context. As in like there is one view in the world where it's like where AI falls short, it's because it's almost always that it doesn't have enough context that you have. And I think this is more of a philosophical point, which is like, well, even if it had all the context that you have, do you think it would come back with the same taste as you do? And I think it's kind of just unknowable at this point. But like there is definitely a thing where people are like, okay, if you just keep on giving all the context that you have, it will surpass you. And I think, and I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Like, are we just getting better at capturing context, and that's why the AI keeps on, and not only our own business context, because the foundation models also kind of bring in other context. Is that what's going on that causes this pendulum swing every now and then? I don't know. I don't know if you thought about it that way, but
yeah, I have put quite a bit of thought into this, and I guess like what I would sort of like almost like back up and ask myself like, okay, like what is an LLM like trained on, and what context does it already have? Well, it has like more context than I could ever actually like have in my brain, I think, when you think about like all the information that it's trained on. And yeah, that's a tough one. I kind of lost my train of thought on that.
That's okay.
Okay,
why don't we just keep going then? Like the next question I have, and like I think you both would have an interesting perspective on this, because we've talked about like taste and how the things oscillate back and forth between, there's new automations and new technology people want to implement, then those get implemented, and then we're back to like, is it the messaging that works? So maybe help me understand what you think people are doing like wrong. Like people are trying to implement AI. What are some of the common pitfalls, mistakes, like challenges that you see?
Well, I think like the main challenge is I had a conversation with a guy earlier this morning who was like asking for some advice because he just started at like the startup and stuff. And like I talked to a lot of people in that position who are maybe like founding growth operators and things like this. And like, well, what like tools should I be like researching? And I'm like, okay, well, Claude Code's really the only thing that I'm gonna like tell you that you need to go download right now. Like it's,
and that's a huge shift, right? Because like up until last year, like you'd have said something like Clay or something like that. like that was like the vibe. And like now it's like, it's at least in the circles that I move in, like and Ben is in that circle, there's definitely a shift where like a lot of GTM is kind of just moving towards Claude Code.
Dude, I literally work out of the terminal 90% of the day. Like if I do not have to leave the terminal, like it's great. I hate clicking through UIs now. It's like super frustrating. That's a different discussion. But like yeah, well, he was like, what tools should I look into? Like what books should I read about like how LLMs work and stuff. I'm like, that's all like good stuff for sure. Don't get me wrong, but I think that a lot of people with like the sort of advent of AI and like all these different tools, they start like seeing like sales and marketing through like a technologist lens instead of like a seller and a marketer. And it's like those tools should never be like the focus. Like your focus should always be like making a one-to-one human connection, and everything else should be in service of that. And if there's anything that's a distraction from that, it's it's a waste, or at worst, preventing it. Right. So I think the problem that most people run into with these tools is that like they see the potential in a shiny toy instead of having like a fleshed out vision for whatever it is that they want to accomplish, whether that's a pipeline goal or do they want to stand up a new system. Like the jobs to be done in sales are way more important than the tools that we're going to use to get there. And people just always want to think about it backwards. And I think it's because like figuring out what a good message is or figuring out what an end state of a process needs to be is like way harder work than the busy work of like standing up a bunch of toys and like, enriching data or something. And I fall into this trap all the time where I'm like, I'm going to go enrich a bunch of leads. I'm going to go like stand up a new automation. But I'm like, is this like procrastination from what like actually needs to happen? Like something that I'm avoiding. So that's just, and I think that's super, super pervasive across like all go-to-market functions. So yeah.
Interesting. What do you think people should focus on then?
Well, it's a really broad question. I think it depends on like your role and your stage and things like that. I can tell you that like what I'm focused on is trying to figure out what problems are closest to revenue and like ruthlessly prioritize those things and things that aren't going to move the needle. Just like it's something I'm working on at Airops right now, actually. And if you're any of my coworkers hearing this, maybe you'll notice this, but like I'm trying to say like no to more stuff, because at least my predilection is to just like say yes to everything, and that totally prevents focus from like what's actually like close to revenue. And at this point, one of the things I'm doing is we have an Asana board, and I'm like scoring like every task based on how much pipeline I think it will produce, and prioritizing based on that, which is something like I've never done before. Like every other company I've ever worked at, it's like we've done shit by the seat of our pants, and had like no organizational structure. Now that I'm in like a real marketing organization, seeing like the problems that marketing organizations have, I'm like, okay, we got to figure out like a better way to do this. And I don't think it's too much different in sales orgs or like RevOps organizations. It's just like a total inability to prioritize work that's like actually important. And I think this is like stuff that like sellers do too. They're like, I'm not going to make a cold call. I'm just going to like email some people or like send them a message on LinkedIn. It's just like, it doesn't matter what role we're in or what job we have, like avoiding difficult, important work is like, it's such a pervasive problem, that basically what I'm trying to do right now is not only like, okay, have my Asana board up to date, but I just plugged in the Asana MCP into Claude. And so now I'm trying to get it to send me a message every morning of what my actual highest priority tasks are, and try to theorize what's going to happen if I do something else other than this stuff. Like, what is the potential like revenue shortfall? So like being able to programmatically assign a dollar amount value to every task when time is like your one non-renewable asset is like something. This is just what I'm focusing on right now. So honestly, like I think if people said no to like 80% of the stuff that they might be asked to do, even from their managers, like if you're a salesperson and like they're like, you go update this Google sheet or something, and like this Google sheet's not moving the needle on revenue, it's like don't fucking do it, and you know, see what happens. Because I actually kind of subscribe to the idea, like you guys might have heard this, is sort of like a meme, where there's some CEO on LinkedIn. He was like, every quarter I cancel all my credit cards, all of the company credit cards, and whatever tools people say are like, oh my God, I can't do my job without this thing that you canceled, I add that back. And if they don't ask for it, then I don't add it back. I'm 90% sure that it's like satire, but that's what I'm starting to subscribe to right now.
That's classic. I know people who like they issue the cards that expire on purpose to do that.
And that's a good idea. Like, there's some things that we're paying for over here where I'm like, I don't really think we should be paying for this.
Yeah. So I think this is a super unique and interesting perspective. Like, I'm tempted to ask you, like, for a couple examples. Like you're saying, I'm saying no to things, I'm saying yes to things. Can you take us through like what that looked like? You made one point, like, hey, I've got this Google sheet, and like maybe you can get AI to update that sheet for you too, right? But what do you mean specifically, right? So people are listening to this and like, okay, yeah, I generally agree. Like, I want to be focused on what's closer to revenue, but like, how are you doing that?
I'm trying to think about how I can say this without like revealing.
Yeah, of course. Don't want to reveal too much,
yeah,
confidential information. So
yeah, I think I would just go back to like, if it's not in service of starting a one-to-one connection with a human being to another human being, like preferably a customer to one of our sales reps, it's probably not something that I really want to spend time on. Like, I don't work on the brand team, you know, I don't work on, I technically I report to the VP of growth. But you know, growth is an interesting like concept and like go to market, because it's sort of the intersection of like sales and marketing where we're scaling one-to-one connections. And so like from my perspective, if what I'm doing isn't going to start a conversation, I probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, that's good. What kind of things do you think like lead to one-to-one conversations?
No, this isn't going to be an exciting answer, but just like if you send an email or a LinkedIn message or like give an SDR a list of people to call, like those things start conversations. Like building niche automations sometimes can be, the trap that I fall into is like, I'm going to go build this automation in Cursor, and like it might be a really cool automation, but sometimes it's like, you know, we spend 3 hours automating something that would not take us 3 hours the entire year, just for the sake of doing it. And if I'm going to automate something, the time that I get back needs to be reallocated towards like working on a campaign, basically. So yeah.
That's always a trap with automation, right? Like, you don't know what the payback is going to be. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you kind of know, but you still are like, you know, you fall into that trap.
Dude, this is where the Asana board comes in though. Like every task that I'm doing right now has a literal dollar amount attached to it. So I should at least have a theory about how much this is time or money this is going to make us. And this is a concept that my new boss introduced me to, which like, it's not like an original concept, like make sure that your time's valuable, you know what I'm saying? But like actually seeing everything on the board gives me a much different perspective on like what I should actually be doing. And like this past week, I've just like had a very like much of a perspective shift. And I actually talked to Evan Dunn over at Titan X. I had a convo with him yesterday about this, and he was saying something that was super interesting. You should interview him. He'd be a good interview.
Evan, I know Evan, and like, you know, we had actually, there was this Slack conversation, and at some point, like I think the CEO of Titan X posted that, like, where somebody was like, anyway, it's a very cool meme that we can put in the show later on, but it was around the same like theme of like, you should just call people. Like that was Evan's kind of thing, was somebody was trying to kind of come up with a very complicated motion for like, doing ABM or something. And then Evan's like, yeah, all that is cool, but just call people. So there was this midwit meme that I whipped up, which was like, yeah, like the really, on one side is just call people, other side just call people, and the people in the middle just complicate everything with automations, essentially.
Yeah, it's tough because I really do believe that if you can insert AI and automation into a bunch of these processes, that you will actually get better outcomes. I mean, I know for a fact, it's not like conjecture or theory. The question becomes like, in a world where you can literally basically do anything, like choosing what to do, which goes back to like taste being the moat. You know what I'm saying? If taste is sort of like this ephemeral, intuitive, I don't know, sensibility, it also applies not just to like graphics on LinkedIn, but also like automations, I guess. So yeah, picking the right thing to do in a world of infinite possibilities. But the thing that Evan said that was interesting is he said that every marketing department needs a project manager, and he said that he's worked at a bunch of places and nobody ever wants to fund it. But he said that that's marketing's number one problem, is that they don't know how to project manage and they don't want to ask anybody for help. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how to project manage and I don't want to ask anybody for help. I'm like, this is so true. Like, I'm the poster boy for this problem. So that's what I'm trying to like solve like within myself, like recently.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, what are you automating with AI then?
Okay, so I can just give you like a list of things that so like one thing that I did today was any new webinar signups that we get in Luma, they're sent to Clay, they're enriched, we get the HubSpot lifecycle stage, the SDR owner, all that, and then that's sent to another sheet where people actually work out of. So otherwise our experiential marketing people would have to like go ask somebody to enrich it in Clay. And now it's like, it's already all done. It's sent to a sheet. You have the information there. You don't have to ask anybody for anything. So that in theory should save people a lot of time.
What do they do once it lands in the sheet? I'm curious now.
What do they do?
Yeah.
I think the AEs and the SDRs like look at it and see if they want to like manually follow up with these people, which now I'm wondering, I wonder if that decision-making process could be automated.
Right.
Because I didn't honestly ask too much questions about like what happens. That's the other thing. Like, people will give me tasks and I don't want to ask too much about like what happens after this information is delivered, because I'm like, listen, I'm just going to give you this thing and, good luck. And what I'm trying to do is actually teach everybody else how to use Claude Code and Cursor over here, which you could do a whole podcast episode on that. Because I think people are just like intimidated by it, and we're also busy. It's like, you can't just go tell people like go build a new skill set overnight. You know what I'm saying? But some of the other stuff.
One of my favorite discovery questions on my calls, which is that like I have this theory of that like you should always work backwards from the action. Mm-hmm. And because people have all these like ideas about like I wish I had this data or this data or whatever. It's always like, okay, imagine you have the perfect data. What would you do with it? That is always a very good question.
That is a good question.
Yeah, it's always like, it's like people come to Syft for de-anonymization and all that stuff, and then it's like, yeah, imagine you knew everybody down to the name, down to whatever, who came to your website or did this, all right, who showed intent. Like, what would you do with it?
Yeah,
and it's funny. It's like sometimes people don't have very good, well thought out answers to that question.
Right.
As in, like, they've missed the forest for the trees, and so it's always a. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, I totally agree. Like, we have that problem in not at Airops, but just like in sales in general. It's like, I can like, this is one of the things I'm trying to work on with SDRs too right now. It's like, listen, I can give you any piece of information that you could ever want. Like, I can give you, I can scrape housing data and like figure out how big these people's houses are who you're calling. Not that that's relevant information for us, but like, I can go get that for you. Like, what are you going to do with it? That's taste, right? Like, if I get somebody on a cold call and I've given you data about their sitemap and we know how much content they're publishing every month, like, what would you actually say? That's like, I think what really differentiates, a good seller from a bad seller, right? Or a good SDR from a bad SDR, is being able to like take sort of like this raw data and like develop a hypothesis like really fast based on like past wins and things like that. And so like people have asked me for certain information too, to like, hey, can you surface this in HubSpot or whatever? And I'm like, yes, but what are you actually going to do with it? Because if you haven't really thoroughly thought this through, I'm not going to go like prioritize it for you. Like, you need to make a really convincing case to me where it's so stupidly obvious what the benefit of this is going to be. And yeah, most people don't think deeply about like what it's like dogs trying to chase a mailman. Like, what would you do? Like, what would you do if you actually caught the mailman? Like, nothing, dogs aren't thinking about that. They're just like, I gotta go get the mailman. So
yeah. So I didn't mean to throw you off, off the topic, but like, yeah. So like, so you were talking about the Luma use case where like, it's like some people, sign up for webinars, you do some qualification and all that, and then you route it into a spreadsheet. I guess my question is like, what are the categories of things that you usually automate? Are they more around like generating these insights and data that humans act on, or it's also like really taking on tasks that humans used to do where they would interface with customers, right? In GTM, there's a lot of customer interfacing, and that you kind of, replace that. Is it like, what is the breakdown there?
Yeah. So I've only been at Airops for like 8 weeks. I have done a lot of stuff since I've been here, but like I can tell you some of the better like automations that I'm more proud of, or like some of the things that I've built on the back end of Email Bison. So this might be like kind of technical in the weeds, but it'd probably be helpful for some people who are doing the same kind of stuff. So like one of the problems with like email sequencers is that when you send an email to people who at large organizations, a lot of times their email might be like bholly@acme.com. Like, that was a valid email that will go to their inbox. But their actual email address is like benholly@acme.com, right? But the email gets delivered, they might reply, and that the reply doesn't get associated with the contact or the campaign or show up as like a positive response. It's just gone into the ether, right?
Yeah.
Because of the way mail routing rules work. So I did something in Cursor where basically I have like some Python scripting, but also like an AI fallback to where like, hey, if we get if we get an untracked reply is what it's referred to as, make sure that it's not from the warm-up pool, because that's what most of the untracked replies are from. Is try to associate it with a contact, match it back to the campaign, and deliver, the positive response back to Slack, which is where all the positive responses go and stuff like that. And so because some of the problem, I won't, talk shit about any of the other email sequencers, but some of the problems with some of the other email sequencers on the market, and I mean, I guess Bison has this problem too, but it handles it a little bit more elegantly and allows you to do this sort of stuff. Is that, yeah, I mean, you'll get replies and they just go, they're just gone. And like, dude, think about like how much money and time it actually costs to get a positive email reply in 2026. Like, we can't waste any of those. And so that's like an automation I've developed.
Gone as in the platform doesn't track it, but they do land back in somebody's inbox, essentially.
Say again?
They're gone in the sense that the platform doesn't track it, and it goes to somebody's inbox, or it doesn't even go to somebody's inbox?
No, it would go. So like the way, this is probably not going to make sense if you don't run like high volume email campaigns, but like basically like the way that it works is, right, like, so I have a ton of inboxes. I don't actually have access to those inboxes. I mean, I do, but they're all hooked up to a sequencer, right? So all of the replies go back to the sequencer, but warm-up emails, again, something I can't sit here and explain all, but like, because it's going to take too much time. But like, if you know what warm emails are, great. If you don't, go Google it and pause the show and then come back. But we don't want those to like show back up in responses, right? But the problem is if the mail routing rules it's usually larger enterprises, right? So like bigger deals potentially, which is where the value in this automation actually comes from. Because for small businesses, this really isn't an issue. But when you're messaging like a 5,000 person company, that's who commonly does this kind of stuff. So you do physically, I don't know if it's physically, but you do physically get the reply. It just doesn't show up as a positive reply. And when you're sending thousands of emails and getting, a ton of responses back, it surfaces it in a way that would not be possible otherwise. And again, if you don't do cold email, this probably isn't going to make sense. You're going to be like, why would this guy care about this? But trust me, it's for me personally too, like I'm a little bit OCD about this stuff. So like if I didn't have this automation, I'd be like searching through like Bison logs, like trying to find untracked replies, and just a huge time sink when I should be doing other stuff, even though it is valuable. But it's like, it's so easy to automate. Like a human shouldn't have to do that. So to answer your earlier question, a lot of the stuff that I've been automating on the front end, like in my early time here, is stuff that like, yeah, I would be doing, but most people wouldn't even be doing it at all ever. Like they weren't tracking untracked replies before I started here, or trying to resurface them. And I'm almost, now that I'm thinking about this, I'm like, I should go look through all of the emails we sent in Smart Lead, and go see what kind of untracked replies we had from those campaigns. Like maybe there's some good stuff in there. Like, I don't know.
And how do you prioritize these opportunities for automation with AI? Is it like, do you have some sort of a rubric where it says like, okay, well, untracked replies are like actually, are a source of leaky pipeline for us? Like, how do you assess what to automate?
Yeah, so I try to assign a pipeline value to everything. And so it's kind of like not scientific. I mean, when I'm doing an email campaign, I can say, hey, I'm going to get a 1% reply rate. Whatever our average sale price is, multiply that, by the percentage of replies, the demos to qualified opportunities. So in that sense, it's scientific. Something like blacklist automation, which is another automation that I worked on, where basically like if you get a bounced email, like that should be blacklisted. And I have an agent and some code that reads the email and is like, did this bounce because of spam filtering or because the email doesn't exist? Well, we're just going to go ahead and blacklist this email so that this person never gets emailed again. That's a little bit more ephemeral. Like I wouldn't assign a value to that necessarily. Whereas I have another automation that automatically sends any positive email responses to a limb list campaign, where my LinkedIn will just send them a connection request with no ask or anything like that. And so the idea is like, if they positively respond, let's take this a step further. They've MQL'd with us. If they positively respond, let's also like add the surface area to my LinkedIn, which is hopefully a good representation of Airops in our company on most days. It's going to increase the chances of them seeing our content on LinkedIn. So those are just sorts of like small things. And when you start adding all this stuff up, it starts to make a difference. Like I've started to see the beginnings of me moving the needle here at Airops, because building these engines takes a while.
Cool. So to summarize, what I heard was like, look, you're using it to automate some form of lead routing.
Mm-hmm.
You're using these new tools and all these things you're building to do enrichment. And then the last piece I heard was like, I would call all of those maybe edge cases, like all of these kind of edge cases that most tools that I'm aware of don't handle well.
Yeah.
You can like go outside of those tools and create automations, your own kind of custom apps, whatever you want to call it, with AI to manage those, and then put that into, your own workflow.
Yeah. Yeah. All the workflows that like I build either in Clay or they're hosted on Versal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what I've been tinkering with because I had this whole idea when I was at Syft, not the CYFT. What I realized was that like all of the vibe coding is going to create a real like mess. And what we really need to do, like as GTM engineers and as like, RevOps people, marketers more broadly, is start treating sales automation like a software organization would treat a GitHub repo for all of their software. So I started I have my own personal GitHub, but I'm like, okay, well, I can't really be like hosting Airops automations on my own personal GitHub because that's probably a huge security risk. If this negates our SOC 2 compliance, I'm sorry, Airops, but now it's all within an Airops owned like GitHub stuff, right? So there shouldn't be any security risks because it's all owned, governed by Airops. So yeah, I was like, all these people like building all this software, there's no like security or anything like that, and so what I'm going to do, like when I have, people that maybe work for me or like other people in the growth org, is like, let's get all of this stuff in the Airops growth team GitHub account and like the Airops Versal account. And this is like not revolutionary at all to a software developer, right? They're like, well, yeah, of course, that's what you're supposed to do. But for people like me who are maybe like less technical or don't like have that background, I'm like, oh, holy shit, like this is actually the answer to this stuff, is like treating it like a software organization as opposed to like maybe a more traditional sales org.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting point, right? Is like, or tell me more about that, right? Like essentially, I feel like you're adopting just software best practices.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't actually know. I don't know what software best practices are, so I couldn't tell you, but I hope so. And yeah, I think like one of my like deeply held like core beliefs about like sales and marketing people is that we should all be like in 2026, I guess, we all need to probably be like deeply technical if we want to build highly successful businesses. And so like as I, attract talent and try to recruit people and things like that, there's one person who I've successfully recruited to Airops so far, and I don't know if they have like a computer science background or whatever, but they know how to do like data warehouses and things like that. And they're on the solutions team. So like kind of like a professional services team or whatever. And it's like, if I bring people into the organization, like I want, and I actually need them to have those sorts of skills. And like, if I told them, hey, go build an app and host it in the growth org GitHub and put it up on the Versal account, like I need them to know what I'm talking about, or at least be willing to like find out, because that stuff's really basic and AI handles so much of it. Like I can literally tell Claude Code to go like audit those things for me and make sure that they're working right. Cause I'm not gonna I'm not gonna like log into all of them and like click around and like look at logs. Like, are you kidding me? I wouldn't even know what they meant, So yeah, trying to run a growth team a little bit more like a software organization. And I think like the principles around project management, which, we're coming back to now, like are kind of similar already. Like you want to run in sprints, you want to do retros about like what you built last week, what worked, what didn't. It's the same thing as like software organizations.
Yeah, I think you made a good point too about like this stuff sounds harder than it is. And so I'll share this with people who are listening to this who maybe are intimidated, like they're not excited or familiar with like getting set up into GitHub. Like I remember when I created the first Python script with ChatGPT and it worked. Yeah. And I was like, wow, like it was like this eye-opening moment for me. And the pro tip that I'll share with everybody was like when I got stuck or something didn't work, I realized like I just took a screen capture of the entire screen. So like any readouts or just any error messages, anything, I just would screen capture it and just drop into ChatGPT so it could read it. So I didn't have to like copy paste or interpret it. I was like, I literally don't even want to take the chance that I don't understand what's happening, or I'm going to try and put it in. And I remember being like floored that worked. Like I was like, oh, just screen capture the whole thing and drop it in, and it reads the image and then can help you get through it, right? Because like I think like from the outside, if you're not familiar with the stuff, it might sound like really intimidating. But you said something I thought really briefly I thought was quite important. That like, hey, if I ask someone on my team to like go set this up in GitHub in the repo that we're using, just ask ChatGPT or Claude how to do it. And for the most part, with maybe a little guidance, most people can with familiarity with the stuff, I think can get through it.
Yeah, well, so first of all, I did that exact same thing with Salesforce when I set it up at my last company. This was like, almost a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now. So AI wasn't quite at the same spot it is now. And I'm like, ChatGPT, how do I make a Salesforce report? And then so I was like, why are these fields not working? And I'm just like screen cap it, throw it in ChatGPT, it would give me the response. I try to fix it, screen cap it, throw it back into ChatGPT. And then of course, later on, I figured out that the CLI works through Cursor, and then it was like game over for like building reports and stuff. But yeah, and people are just intimidated. Like there's nothing to be afraid of. Like the terminal can't hurt you, it's not going to bite.
No, I think that's why I brought this up. That's why I thought like this would be really important for like people who are perhaps new to this, which I think there's still a lot of people out there, even in the GTM world, for like, they're kind of experimenting, they're hacking around the edges, but they really haven't gone all the way in. And they're like, there's some hesitation that like what you just described, like screen capturing, and then eventually you figure out that like there's ways to use MCP server or whatever to kind of connect to a lot of these tools, and then you can just kind of do it that way. And like that's like maybe the next level. But I think the screen capture of the error message is the gateway.
Oh yeah. Dude, I've put so many error messages into ChatGPT, like you wouldn't believe. Like, why isn't this working? But that's
oh my God.
Like, I think people are just afraid to be dumb or be wrong or like feel stupid or something, which is just prevents us from doing a lot of other stuff in life too, not just like trying to figure out vibe coding or whatever. So you got to just get over that and, you know, not be afraid to fail, or else you're never going to learn anything.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent sentiment. What else should we talk about? Like, what have we not talked about that you would like us to talk about? We have about like 10 minutes here or so.
Well, I don't know off the top of my head. I do see this question about combining data platforms like Syft with a workflow tool like Airops. So I would actually ask Imran, like, what do you actually know about Airops? Do you know enough to answer that question?
I know about Airops. Like, you know, I know that Airops was like started as like sort of my initial impression of Airops was, which I think is somewhat outdated after hearing what you said earlier in the show, which is like Airops was like more like was like clay for content engineering way. Because I think that's where it started. And I think you all are now focusing more on the sort of the AEO side of things, it seems like. But to me, at least, that's how I bucket Airops in my head generally, right? And so, yeah. Anyway, that's to answer your question. That's what I think of Airops.
Yeah, so no, we still are a content engineering workflow platform, but I don't really like so obviously, you know, we want to talk about that, but I think it's more interesting to me to like when people are like, oh, what does Airops do? Well, it does a lot of things, but what it actually does, what the outcome is you show up in AI conversations. How you do that is, I don't want to say immaterial because there's obviously a lot of thought and effort that we put into solving that problem, but that's not what, you know, that's not what people don't buy Airops so that they can like build workflows. You know what I'm saying? They're like, I want to show up when people ask what the best de-anonymization platform is in ChatGPT. But no, I thought about like, okay, if you're using Syft, you guys track like Reddit and like third-party like mentions as well.
Yeah, we track like LinkedIn right now. Reddit's actually on the roadmap, but yeah, first I call it second-party intent usually because like a lot of your LinkedIn data is usually first-party, but it's just hosted on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So what I would do if I were somebody who had Syft and Airops is, and I don't know the full functionality of Syft, so this might be like not a real workflow, but like anytime people were mentioning the product, I would send that information to maybe like an SQL database or something like that, SQLite, and like just have like different timestamps for like a different post. And here's the post, and this is the platform that it was on, whether it was Reddit or LinkedIn, and like see if there's a common thread in messages or in questions that people are asking, because you know, AI search still, you know, largely functions in a similar fashion to SEO. That divergence is widening every day, right? So the way that SEO works used to be basically like if you had no good SEO, like you weren't going to show up in ChatGPT, right? Now that's still true to a certain extent, but it's changing faster and faster every day. But I would use all of those different like mentions to formulate content ideas, and then I would have content created that like answered those questions and put onto your website or your blog automatically. And you could, you know, there's a lot of like finagling that you need to do, and I still think you should human review all your content, which I don't think is like a hot take or anything, but and we tell people to do that at Airops. We don't say, oh yeah, just go build, just, you know, create 10,000 pages of blog spam. Like we don't tell people to do that. If they do that, we specifically told them not to, just FYI. So yeah, I think that would be an interesting workflow that anybody could do, whether they were using Syft or any other sort of like Trigify or something like that. Like take all the mentions, aggregate the information, see what the common threads are, and create content against that to answer it.
Right, because I think I mean that's a very important point, because I think the visibility aspect of it and the measurement aspect of AEO and GEO is still very nascent. As in, like, you don't get a lot of signals out of these platforms in terms of like, and they all give different answers to different people, right? You can ask the same thing. You can say like best content engineering workflow platform. Depending on your history, they give you a different answer.
Yep.
And so it's kind of hard to really figure out, like, and then they don't share that with anyone, right? They don't share the context within which the answer is given.
Not yet, but I see them opening it up eventually.
Yeah, maybe. I think once they start building out ads and stuff on their platform, they'll probably do some of that. But I think to your point, yeah, like right now, a lot of that signal comes from like Reddit or LinkedIn or social, or like what is the context in which your product gets brought up, right? And that all of it is public data, and then you can use that to then sort of feed the LLM sort of content that kind of, that then it can kind of, it's a very indirect influence. But I think that's the best that we have right now. And I think one other place where Syft could be useful, and some of our customers use it that way, is also that when people come from ChatGPT or from other LLMs, right, Perplexity or Claude, those are very high intent visits generally. They convert very well. And so if what you have to do is you have to figure out, and it's like I have a post about this, but my theory is that over a period of time, the overall traffic that comes to websites, human traffic, is going to diminish.
It already is. It's already diminishing a lot. Yeah.
And then like, but the traffic might still increase in volume because the agents are going to hammer your website left and right, which is also happening. Because for every single, for every single ChatGPT query or something, the magnification factor is about hundreds or thousands. Like for Claude, it's quite high. Cloudflare did some research on this. And so the volume goes up, but human traffic goes down. And so then how do you then figure out what is valuable in that traffic? And with something like Syft, you can kind of actually use that to figure out, okay, what is valuable traffic versus what is sort of the more automated robot traffic, right? And if you can,
how does that work? They do that.
Well, you look at referrals from because the robot traffic is different, right? The way they hit you is very different than the way humans do. And human traffic is usually sessionized. Like somebody will come in and like, they will do like a 5-minute session, like Airops. Whereas the robot traffic is like a page level thing. It kind of is hitting you like, in very, I think the patterns are quite different.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And so for somebody like, so you write all this amazing content based on third-party data, and then you use Airops to engineer that content. How do you then know like when a valuable high intent human shows up on your website and consumes that content? And that's where like I think you can kind of again use something like Syft to kind of figure out, and there are other tools on the market as well, but like figure out, okay, sort of that's why we are kind of called Syft as well, because you're trying to sift between like high value versus non-high value traffic as well. And so in general, I would say I think that's the measurement loop and the sort of the ROI loop is where something like Syft can kind of be integrated with Airops. I have one question actually that I wanted to ask while you were discussing, which is like, like in GTM right now, a lot of engineering goes into what I would call deterministic workflows. Right, which is like, okay, well, this, like your Luma example was actually very good. Like, somebody signs up for that webinar, you do some processing, put it in a spreadsheet. But then, like, we've seen some other domains like coding, where agents are very good at open-ended, tasks. Like you give it a high-level objective, it kind of figures out what it needs to do. Like design stuff, writes it, tests it, all of that stuff. Like, where do you see in your work, are you building those kind of workflows, which I call like sort of non-deterministic, like, you give it an objective, it optimizes in a loop kind of a thing, or it's still too early for that?
Like Optimizing like a real agent like workflow.
Yeah, like a real agent kind of runs, and you know what, like coding is like that, right? Today it's just like, you give it an objective, it will keep on fixing it, write tests like until it gets it ready. It's and it's pretty autonomous, right? You don't kind of say exactly like, if this happens, do this and this and this. Like you don't give that like very specific instructions. In GTM, do you think like, have you built workflows like, or like, automations like that, which are fairly autonomous, or you still think that there are technical, or I would say even business cases against doing those kind of things?
Well, there's only business cases for them. I'm like an AI optimist, I think. People are like, oh, AI is going to like mess up your whatever. I'm like, okay, well, if you're not going to deploy it, your competitors are going to deploy this, and eventually they'll figure it out. So you need to figure it out like now.
Right.
As far as like what I've done to date at Airops, I've not set up a truly autonomous agent that self improves and is like does a task day over day or whatever. So right now, like what I have are AI decision making steps where an LLM will say, oh, I'm going to make a decision about this, and that's final, and then it feeds the output to wherever it goes. So that's not really an agent. Some people like call that an agent. I don't really think it is.
It's like a workflow where some of the steps are AI sort of influenced, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, and typically I try to do deterministic workflows if possible, and I have the AI as like a fallback. So I'm like, hey, if you can't make a decision about this, fall back to the AI and allow it to make a call. But yeah, I don't see like there's no case against it. Like and so my last gig, we worked with cybersecurity and IT people, and they were very, very cautious when it came to AI. And when you think about the persona profile, like their whole job is to make sure that businesses don't like implode or get hacked. Like continuity is like, and continuity, stability, and compliance is like what their job is. And when you think about like what my job is, it's almost like the total opposite of that. So, and especially like at Airops or like an AI startup, like the whole, purpose is to like disrupt things. So I like, yeah, are there problems? Are there risks? Yes. But I just think you should break stuff. I don't know. I mean, that's what businesses don't like exist and just like not ever like break. This is just a different kind of like breaking, I think.
Yeah.
So that'll be my answer.
Yeah. I think it's I think there is like definitely a business risk aspect to it. Also, I think a lot of GTM is like I feel like the feedback loops are too slow for us to kind of optimize things. Right. Like there are some parts of GTM where I think you can optimize, like ad spend is like a very classic optimization problem, as Greg would tell you. But like I think there are some other things. I think sales is incredibly hard. Like you don't know, like you send some copy to someone and then like, you gotta wait for it to, and it's not even clear, like, what is a positive response versus what is not a positive response a lot of times.
Yeah. And
so, like, anyways, the loops are pretty slow, pretty ambiguous as well. So I don't know. My thinking is that it's a harder domain to do these optimizations in, but like I always like to hear like what people like you in the trenches are also seeing.
Yeah. I mean, I'll deploy agents like in Claude Code, like, hey, go do this. Like I'll deploy a bunch of sub agents to like score things, but that's not like automated really. That's like, I'm deploying them right now and they're never going to run again. So I don't know. But I actually do have another meeting now, so I'm going to have to jump off.
Hey, that was great.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, guys. Imran, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.